They say Christmas brings families together. I suppose that's true, just not always in the way you expect. The morning started the same way it had for the last 7 years since my wife, Linda, passed. The scent of cinnamon coffee drifting through the hallway, the sound of wrapping paper tearing in the living room, and my daughter-in-law's high, sharp laughter cutting through the air like the sound of glass breaking. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment before joining them, staring at my reflection in the mirror. 72 years staring back, wrinkled, steady, uninvited, but still present. My son, Greg, says I've aged well for a man who spent 40 years wiring other people's houses. My knees disagree. When I finally made it down the stairs, the living room looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Artificial snow sprayed on the windows, an 11-foot tree covered in gold ornaments. The scent of baked ham and vanilla candles mixing with that sterile sweetness new money seems to have. "Morning, Dad." Greg called from the sofa, his voice overly bright. He had a Santa hat tilted at an angle that made him look younger than he was, 44, divorced once, remarried to ambition disguised as kindness. "Morning," I said, easing myself into the armchair by the fire. My chair, though they'd replaced the old upholstery with beige fabric to match the decor. Hannah, my daughter-in-law, was passing out presents, designer boxes, ribbon bags, all with matching gold name tags printed in some expensive font. She moved around the room like a hostess at a charity gala, her perfume thick and confident. "For you, Greg," she said, handing him a box that looked like it belonged in a boutique window. "And for the kids." She paused, then turned toward me, a small smile curling her lips. "And here's yours, George." It was a thin, square package, wrapped in simple paper. My handwriting on the tag. "To Hannah and Greg with love." I'd placed it under the tree last night myself, the way Linda used to do. But she wasn't giving me my present. She was handing me back my own. "Oh, this one's from you, isn't it?" she said, her tone light but sharp around the edges. "Yes," I said, "something for the both of you." She exchanged a glance with Greg, that kind of marital look that happens in half a second. A whole conversation in silence. The kids had already torn open their gifts, tablets, headphones, sneakers that probably cost more than my entire grocery bill. "Go on then," I said quietly. "Open it." Hannah peeled the paper back with manicured fingers, slow and cautious, like she already knew it wasn't going to sparkle. When she finally lifted the lid, her expression faltered for just a moment before recovering. Inside lay a leather-bound photo album, simple brown stitched by hand, the cover embossed with a single word, family. Greg leaned closer, brows knitting. "Oh, wow." "Open it," I said. "Linda and I made copies of our old photos before she passed. There's one from every Christmas we ever had, even yours from when you were still in college." Hannah flipped through the pages, my wife's neat handwriting beneath each photograph. The kids' first birthdays, our old house, the porch where we used to drink coffee on cold mornings, Greg at 12 holding his first fishing rod, all crooked grin and wild hair. "Oh," Hannah said again. "In that way people do, when they're unsure if something is supposed to mean more than it looks." "That's nice." The word hung in the air like a faint smell of burnt toast. Greg cleared his throat. "Thanks, Dad. Really thoughtful." The youngest Mason piped up. "Is that all?" "It's just pictures." Hannah's laugh followed immediately, light, high-pitched, practiced. "Kids, don't be rude," she said, though her eyes never met mine. "Grandpas from another generation. They love things like this." "Things like this?" I repeated, smiling faintly. The children went back to their mountain of wrapping paper. Greg handed Hannah a small box with a grin that could have belonged to a salesman. She opened it to reveal a diamond bracelet, thin, bright, gleaming under the Christmas lights. "Oh, Greg," she breathed, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "It's beautiful." He beamed. clearly pleased with himself. You deserve it. She turned the bracelet on her wrist, admiring it. Not like a photo album, she said softly, almost playfully. But the words still cut. They laughed together. Not cruelly, maybe not even consciously. But the sound filled the room with that hollow cheer that doesn't reach the heart. I sipped my lukewarm coffee and let the laughter roll over me like a tide. I noticed the details no one else did. The faint chip on the corner of the glass coffee table. The electric bill tucked halfway under a magazine. The faint hum of the new heater I'd bought for them last winter. Small, ordinary things that meant more than diamonds ever would. They had no idea how much of this room, this life, was built on my money, my sweat, my silence. After lunch, when the plates were cleared and the noise of new toys filled the house, I sat alone in the corner with the photo album on my lap. The leather was warm from Hannah's hands. I traced the cover with my finger. The word family pressed deep into the hide. Linda's voice echoed faintly in my mind. Don't let them turn your kindness into weakness, George. Promise me that. I had promised. I just hadn't realized I'd need to keep that promise this late in life. In the distance, Hannah's laughter rose again. Something about dinner reservations and champagne for New Year's. Greg was talking about refinancing. The children argued over an iPad. And I sat there, an invisible man in a house full of people. The old warmth of Christmas reduced to the hum of appliances and polite laughter. They thought my gift was cheap. They thought my time, my memories, my love were relics of a past that didn't fit their world anymore. But the truth, the one written deep inside my bones, was simple. They were opening presents in my house, and I was done pretending to be a guest. There's a particular silence that settles over a house after the holidays. A silence filled with crumbs, half-drunk wine glasses, and the faint smell of something that used to feel like love. For the next few days, Greg and Hannah were busy with their lives, or what they called their lives. Business calls on speakerphone, Pilates classes, grocery deliveries, endless scrolling on phones. I moved quietly around them, the ghost who still paid the property taxes. On December 28th, I found Hannah standing in the hallway with her tablet, pointing at the cracked molding above the stairwell. We really should renovate, she was saying. The walls are practically ancient. This place needs a total refresh. Greg nodded absently, his phone pressed to his ear. Maybe we'll start in spring. I'll call the contractor Dad used to. Then he noticed me in the doorway. Oh, hey, Dad. Didn't see you there. Apparently not, I said. He smiled that awkward, half-apologetic way adult children do when they've forgotten you're part of the picture. We were just talking about the house. It's, getting old. So am I said. Does that mean you'll replace me too? He chuckled as if I told a joke. You're impossible sometimes. I try. Hannah had already moved on. Anyway, once we redo the kitchen and maybe add an outdoor deck, this place could easily appraise at $900,000, maybe even more. I leaned on the banister, feeling the smooth wood beneath my hand, the same wood I'd sanded and varnished myself 30 years ago when Linda and I first bought the house. $900,000, I repeated quietly. That's quite something. Hannah turned to me. You have to think long-term, George. Equity, resale value. Those things matter. We could make this place incredible. I nodded slowly. Incredible, I said, though I wasn't sure she understood that what made a house incredible wasn't quartz countertops or open floor plans. It was the echo of your wife humming in the kitchen, the height marks you carved into the doorframe when your kid was 8. Those were the renovations I remembered, the kind that never went out of style. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the dining table with the lamp turned low. The house creaked softly around me. My hands found their way to the old metal box Linda and I used to keep important papers in. The hinges groaned when I opened it. Inside were property tax receipts, mortgage statements, the title deed, yellowed slightly at the edges, but still legible. I spread them out carefully, like cards in a game only I still knew how to play. Owner, George W. Baines. Not Greg, not Hannah, not the Baines family. Me. I stared at the bold letters, feeling that strange mixture of power and sadness that comes with remembering you still exist. When Linda and I bought the house back in 1992, we were two tired dreamers with a small savings account and big hopes. She used to say, "This place will be our fortress." She was right. I just didn't realize I'd be defending it alone. I ran a finger over the line with my name. My handwriting was shaky now, but back then I'd signed with confidence. Pen pressed deep into the paper, certain that family meant something more permanent than ink. I remembered the conversation 5 years ago when Greg had tried to convince me to transfer the deed. "It's just paperwork, Dad. A technicality. You'll still live here. It just helps with taxes." Taxes, I'd repeated then, not quite trusting the slick smile he'd inherited from his mother's side. But I'd been cautious. Maybe Linda's voice had whispered from somewhere beyond, reminding me not to give away the last thing she'd loved. I signed the management rights over, but not the ownership. The deed stayed in my name, quiet and untouched, like a loaded gun gathering dust in a drawer. And now, as I looked at it under the soft yellow light, I realized what I'd done wasn't just cautious. It was prophetic. In the morning, Hannah called from the kitchen, her voice sharp and impatient. "George, could you not use the dryer during the day? It hikes up our energy bill." I muttered under my breath, folding the papers back into the box. When I came into the kitchen, she was standing by the counter, scrolling through her phone. "We're trying to keep expenses down. It's been tight lately." Tight. I looked around at the stainless steel fridge, the imported coffee machine, the fruit bowl filled with avocados that no one ever ate. "Greg's business slowed this quarter," she said, avoiding my eyes. "We might need to refinance." I said, "Refinance my house?" Her head snapped up. "Our house." There it was, the correction. Sharp, immediate, territorial. I smiled thinly. "Of course." She softened her tone, mistaking my quiet for submission. "You know, George, you're lucky. You get to live here rent-free while we handle all the responsibilities. Not many people your age have that. Rent-free." I felt something deep inside me turn cold. The same cold that moves in when a man realizes he's been written out his own life. That evening, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, the snow had started to fall again, soft and silent. The streetlights painted everything in pale gold. The photo album still lay on the table where I'd left it after Christmas. I flipped it open. Linda's smile on the first page. Greg as a boy, holding a toy train, the old porch swing we'd built together one summer. I thought the album was a gift for them, a reminder of where they came from. But now I saw it for what it truly was, a record of ownership, a declaration of memory. The next morning, I took the old metal box to the study and laid everything out again. I called my accountant, Margaret, the only person left from the old days who still treated me like someone whose opinion mattered. "George," she said cheerfully when she picked up. "It's been a while. Everything all right?" "Depends," I said. "I need to know what the market's like for a 4-bedroom house on Westbury Lane." "Your place?" she asked, surprised. "Are you thinking of selling?" I watched the winter sun creep across the floor, warming the corner of the rug Linda used to love. "I'm thinking," I said. "Just thinking." There was a pause. "Well, last I checked, properties in your area go for between 600 and 700,000, depending on renovations." "Why do you ask?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm curious what memories are worth these days." When I hung up, I sat back and closed my eyes. The decision wasn't made yet, not fully. But the first crack had formed in the dam. That night, Hannah served dinner without looking at me. Greg was talking about selling one of their cars to lighten the load. He didn't notice the way I looked at him, the way a man looks at something he once loved but can no longer protect. The walls around us, my walls, absorbed every careless word. I thought about what Linda would say If she could see us now, she'd probably place a gentle hand on my shoulder and whisper, "Don't beg for gratitude, George. Just remember whose name is on the door." I remembered, and I was starting to wonder what it might mean to remind them, too. New Year's Eve arrived with too much noise. The house smelled of champagne perfume and those expensive candles Hannah loved. The kind that claimed to smell like winter solstice, but really smelled like money trying too hard. Their friends had started showing up around 7. SUVs lined the driveway. Laughter spilled into the night, and I sat upstairs in my room, watching it all from the narrow window. From above, it looked like another world entirely. Loud, bright, oblivious. Every few minutes, the floor shook with bass from a speaker downstairs. I could hear Hannah's voice floating up, shrill, joyful, slightly slurred. Someone shouted Greg's name. Someone else toasted to new beginnings. New beginnings. I turned off my bedside lamp and sat in the dark. I'd seen enough new beginnings to know how quickly they turned into endings. Around 9, I went downstairs, meaning only to fetch a glass of water. The hallway was full of shoes, coats, and half-empty champagne flutes. Music pulsed from the living room. Something electronic, too fast, too young for me to even pretend to like. Greg saw me first. "Dad," he said, coming over, cheeks flushed. "Didn't think you'd join the party." "Neither did I said. "Come on, have a drink." I shook my head. "No, thanks. Just water." He looked relieved, as though even my abstinence was one less thing to explain. In the kitchen, I poured a glass from the filter tap. The counters gleamed under pendant lights I had installed myself 2 decades ago, back when craftsmanship still meant something. Behind me, Hannah was laughing with one of her friends, a tall woman with glitter around her eyes and a voice like a saw. They didn't see me at first. "So how long do you think before he finally moves out?" the woman asked. Hannah laughed, an easy, careless laugh that cut deeper than any insult. "If Greg had his way, he'd already be gone. But you know how these things go, guilt, sentimentality, all that. He's harmless, just old. Still, living with your father-in-law, that must be a nightmare." "Oh, you have no idea," Hannah said. "He still keeps old photos everywhere. The whole place feels like a museum. I swear, sometimes I think he forgets this is our house now." The glass trembled in my hand. I placed it on the counter before it shattered. Their voices blurred into the background. Talk of upcoming trips, renovations, promotions. Every word pushed me further toward the edge of a decision I'd been tiptoeing around for years. When I returned to my room, the house felt heavier, as if even the walls had overheard her words and recoiled. I sat at my desk and opened the drawer. The metal box was still there. I lifted the deed again, feeling the texture of the paper, the legal weight of ownership. There it was in black and white. Owner George W. Baines. Still mine. I didn't sleep that night. I waited for the party to die down, for the music to fade into drunken murmurs and finally into silence. Around 2 in the morning, the laughter stopped. A few minutes later, the sound of a car door slamming. I stood by the window and watched as Hannah and Greg stumbled out to say goodbye to their last guests. Her diamond bracelet, the one from Christmas, caught the porch light like a flare. When the front door shut, I turned to the small folder on my desk. Inside it, the card from my accountant, Margaret. Beneath it, the business card of a realtor I'd once helped with his wiring, a good man named Dennis Cole. I picked up the phone. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice sleepy but alert. "Mr. Baines? Everything all right?" "Dennis," I said calmly, "I'm thinking of selling." There was a pause. "Your house?" "Yes. I want it quiet. Private listing. Cash buyer preferred. I can have someone out tomorrow morning for an evaluation," he said. "Are you sure about this?" I looked around the dim room. The framed wedding photo of Linda smiled back at me from the dresser. Her eyes had that steady warmth, the kind that always made me believe she could see further than I could. I've never been more sure, I said. Dennis arrived the next day, just after sunrise. Greg and Hannah were still asleep, the remnants of their party scattered across the living room. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, confetti in the carpet. He was discreet professional. Took photos quietly, measured square footage, asked few questions. When he left, he shook my hand and said, "This'll move fast. It's a seller's market. Expect offers by the end of the week." By Monday, two had already come in. By Wednesday, I accepted one, $685,000 cash. Everything moved quickly after that. The buyer's agent sent over paperwork. I signed where I needed to. My name appeared again and again. The legal reminder that I had the right, the power, the ownership. The closing date was set for January 6th. On the 5th, I packed. Just the essentials, clothes, old letters, a few of Linda's things, the photo album no one wanted. I left behind the new furniture, the electronics, the empty promises. That evening, Greg found me in the hallway with my suitcase. "Going somewhere?" he asked, surprised. "Just for a few days," I said. "Where to? Does it matter?" He frowned. "We could have helped." "No," I said. "You've helped enough." He didn't press. He never did when things required real understanding. The next morning, I left before they woke up. I handed the keys to Dennis at the cafe downtown. He passed me the cashier's check with both hands, like a man delivering something sacred. "Congratulations, Mr. Baines," he said. "Clean sale. No contingencies." I nodded, folded the check into my wallet, and walked out into the cold January air. It felt lighter than I expected. Not relief, not joy, but something simpler. The weight of ownership finally finding its purpose. I spent the next few days in a modest rental apartment on the east side, small but clean, with a window overlooking a quiet park. It smelled faintly of pine and fresh paint, the kind of place no one would think to find me. On the evening of the 6th, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the snow fall. My phone buzzed, a message from Dennis. "Keys delivered. Buyer has taken possession." That was it. No drama, no hesitation. Just a single sentence, marking the end of a chapter I'd been trapped in for too long. I looked around my new place. Empty, peaceful mine. Somewhere across town, Greg and Hannah were probably returning from work, stepping out of their SUV, arms full of groceries, ready to unlock a door that would no longer open. But that moment wasn't mine to witness. Not yet. That would come later, when silence met confusion, when laughter met consequence. For now, I only sat there, sipping my tea, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd finally remembered his own name. Linda would have understood. She always did. The morning of January 7th began with a calm so pure it almost felt unreal. The park outside my new apartment lay under a perfect layer of snow, untouched, unspoiled. The kind of silence you can only hear when no one knows where you are. I made coffee, slow and deliberate, and turned on the small radio that came with the furnished unit. A weather report murmured softly. Heavy snow in the north suburbs. Expect delays on Westbury Lane. Westbury Lane. My old street. My old house. I smiled. By noon, the peace was broken by the first phone call. It started with a single vibration against the table, then another, until the phone buzzed like something alive. Greg. I didn't answer. A minute later, Hannah. Then again. Then texts. "Dad, call me right now. Something's wrong with the house. Please answer your phone." I let the messages pile up. The snow outside glittered in the weak sunlight. I took my time buttering toast, the smell of coffee mixing with quiet satisfaction. By the time I finally answered, the phone had been ringing for nearly an hour. "Dad." Greg's voice exploded through the line. "What the hell did you do?" "Good morning to you too," I said, stirring my coffee. The locks are changed. There's a notice on the door. It says the property's been sold." Sold, Dad. I know. What do you mean? I signed the papers myself. For a moment, only his breathing came through. Harsh, uneven. You can't. This is our home. No, I said quietly. It was my home. The paperwork says so. Always did. Hannah's voice came faintly from the background. Shrill, panicked. Ask him if this is some kind of joke. Tell him we're calling a lawyer. Greg's tone cracked. Dad, please, be reasonable. You can't just throw your family out. I'm not throwing anyone out, I said. I simply sold what belonged to me. You can't do this. I already did. He fell silent again, and I could almost hear the weight of it. The sound of arrogance collapsing under its own disbelief. Finally he spoke, his voice smaller. Where are we supposed to go? Maybe start with the people who thought I was harmless and old, I said. They seemed to have all the answers. Dad. Greg, I interrupted softly. You told me once that the house was yours, that you'd handle all the responsibilities. Do you remember? I didn't mean... I know what you meant. On the other end, Hannah's voice grew louder. Ask him about our things. The furniture, the clothes, everything's inside. He can't just sell the house with our belongings. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. I told the buyer they could leave your possessions undisturbed for 30 days. It's in the contract. You'll receive a formal eviction notice by the end of the week. You can collect what you need before that. Greg's voice cracked. You planned this. I learned it from you, I said quietly. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the faint hum of traffic filled the silence between us. Dad, he said finally. A plea now instead of anger. We didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe not, but you did. I know what you thought, I said. You thought I was finished, that all I had left were memories and mistakes. You thought kindness meant weakness. Please, Dad, we'll fix this. We'll buy it back. I can talk to the bank. The house isn't for sale anymore, I said. It's gone. Gone. His voice trembled. Where will we live? I looked out the window at the white stillness beyond the glass. You're young. You'll manage. Maybe now you'll learn what a mortgage feels like. Dad, please. I ended the call. The silence that followed was heavy but clean, like fresh snow after storm. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Dennis, the realtor. Just checking in, he said. Buyers confirmed possession. The notice was posted this morning. All official. Thank you, Dennis. You all right? Better than I've been in years. He hesitated. You sure about not telling them beforehand? I mean, this is drastic. I smiled faintly. So was there in gratitude. When I hung up, I opened the photo album on the table. The same one they'd mocked as a cheap gift. The pages smelled faintly of dust and memory. Linda's handwriting curved across the margins in blue ink. Christmas 1999. Greg's first tree he decorated himself. I traced the letters slowly, feeling them under my fingertips. I had tried to give them something that couldn't be bought. The record of a family built with love instead of loans. They laughed. Now, they'd learned the difference between a house and a home. That evening, as the sun went down, I made a note on a piece of paper and slipped it between the final pages of the album. The words came without effort, as though Linda herself whispered them through my pen. Some gifts take time to be understood. The next morning, I left the album with a courier addressed to Greg's office. No explanation, no message, just the album, and between its pages, the truth. Meanwhile, on Westbury Lane, a moving truck stood idling in front of the snow-covered driveway. Hannah stood on the porch, clutching the official letter from the county records office. Her face drained of color. Greg's voice carried down the street, hoarse and broken. It says here, property sold as is, January 6th, legal owner, George W. Baines. Their neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering. The house, their pride, their status symbol, their stage, had turned on them overnight, like a living thing reclaiming its master. The realtor's lockbox clicked shut on the front door, sealing it for good. That night, I sat in my small apartment with the radio off, listening to the hum of the radiator. I thought of Linda, of her quiet wisdom, of the years I'd spent confusing endurance for peace. For the first time in a long while, the air felt light. They laughed when I gave them memories. They didn't know those memories were the deed. And now the house had gone exactly where it belonged, away from the ungrateful, back to the man who built it. The following week passed quietly, as if the world itself were pausing to see what I would do next. I woke early each morning, the way I always had, and brewed coffee in a pot half the size of the one at the old house. The air in the new apartment smelled of pine and radiator dust, but it was mine. Every sound, every silence belonged to me. I'd left behind the noise, the clinking glasses, the shallow compliments, the endless self-importance that filled that house like perfume. Now I had peace. The phone didn't ring much anymore. A few calls from Greg went unanswered. Then none at all. On the fourth morning, a letter arrived. A real one-paper envelope, postmarked in town. The handwriting was his. Dad, I don't know how to start this. We've been staying in a hotel near the office. Hannah's angry. The kids are confused. I keep trying to explain, but there's no version that makes me look good. You're right. I was ungrateful. I took everything for granted. I don't know how to fix this. If you wanted to punish me, you've succeeded. But if there's still some part of you that can forgive, I'll be here, waiting. Greg. I read it twice. There was sincerity there, I think, but also fear. Fear of losing comfort, more than of losing me. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the photo album between two pages. Christmas 2004, Greg's promotion. The first big tree we bought together. I smiled faintly. Another page in the story, I murmured. That night, I walked to the park near my apartment. The snow crunched beneath my boots. My breath hung in the air like smoke. The park lamps cast long shadows over the benches, and I sat on one, watching my own in the snow, smaller now, but still standing. For years, I'd thought forgiveness meant allowing myself to be walked on. I see it differently now. Forgiveness is letting go of the rope you've been pulling against, the one that only burns your own hands. I had nothing left to prove. 3 days later, I went back to the neighborhood, not out of cruelty, curiosity maybe, closure. The house stood there as I'd left it, but changed. A for lease sign hung from the gate. Fresh paint glowed faintly under the winter light. Through the frosted window, I saw workers moving furniture. Strangers in what used to be our living room. Across the street, Mrs. Delaney, the old neighbor, was sweeping her walkway. She spotted me and waved cautiously. George? My goodness, haven't seen you in a while. Been keeping busy, I said. She hesitated. I heard there were some problems. I nodded. Nothing that time won't fix. She studied me for a moment, perhaps noticing the calm in my face, the weight gone from my shoulders. Well, she said softly, you always took care of that house. It's strange seeing someone else there. Yes, I said, watching the window one last time. But maybe it was never the house I needed to keep. We spoke a few minutes more, the weather, the neighborhood, the small things people talk about when there's nothing more to say. Then I wished her well and left. As I turned the corner, I felt the final thread snap, clean, painless, inevitable. Back in the apartment, I made tea and opened the photo album again. The last page was empty, a blank space I'd left on purpose. I took out a pen and wrote, January 12th, 2025. Moved to Maple Street. Small apartment. Quiet. Warm. Mine. I placed a photograph beside the note. The view from my window, a simple park, a bench, a single lamp glowing against the snow. Not a mansion. Not a legacy. But peace. I closed the album, tied it with the brown ribbon Linda had once used to wrap gifts, and set it on the shelf above my desk. It struck me then, the irony of it all. They'd mocked that gift, called it cheap, meaningless. But it had outlasted every diamond, every gadget, every bit of plastic and pretense that had ever sat under that tree. Because memories, when tended properly, don't lose value. They gain it. I received one last call from Greg weeks later. His voice was quiet this time, stripped of bravado. "Dad, we found a rental. It's small but cozy. Hannah's been quiet. The kids miss you." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll remember next Christmas for the right reasons. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, even this." I let the silence linger a moment. "You're welcome, son." Before he could say more, I added gently, "And Greg, take care of that family. They're yours now, truly. You'll have to build your own home this time." He exhaled shakily. "I will." We said goodbye, and I knew we both meant it in more ways than one. That evening, I watched the snow fall again outside my window. In the faint reflection on the glass, I could almost see Linda sitting beside me, her hand on my arm, her smile small and knowing. "You finally did it," she seemed to say. "You finally came home." I raised my cup toward her reflection, a quiet toast. "Here's to us," I whispered, "to peace and to good riddance." The radio hummed softly in the background, a slow jazz tune, something from another lifetime. The photo album rested on the shelf, the last page filled, the story complete. They thought I gave them a cheap gift. They didn't understand. I gave them the only thing I could, a lesson worth more than any house. And now, as the snow thickened outside and the lights of the city blurred into quiet gold, I closed my eyes and smiled. They laughed when I gave them memories. Now memories are all they own.